The cantina on Nexus Station buzzed with quiet conversations and the clink of glasses. Smoke from a dozen different worlds drifted through the dim light. In the back corner, away from the crowd, sat a figure that made most patrons look twice. Before quickly turning away, Commander HFY was not hard to miss. His blue-gray skin bore deep scars that ran from his neck to his hands. 4 golden eyes, each the size of a human fist, moved constantly as they watched the room. His large frame filled the booth, and his 6-fingered hands wrapped around a glass of amber liquid that he had not touched in over an hour. Jake Morrison slid into the seat across from him. The young human reporter looked nervous as he placed a small recording device on the table between them. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the settings. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Commander," Jake said in a quiet voice. No, this is not easy for you." HFY's 4 eyes focused on the human. For a long moment he said nothing. The cantina seemed to grow quieter around them, as if other customers sensed something important was about to happen. "Easy," HFY repeated slowly. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "Nothing about humans has ever been easy," Jake leaned forward. "The Galactic Council has kept most details about the Terran integration wars classified for 20 years. The public knows humans joined the coalition, but not how or why." "Your unit was there from the beginning?" The alien veteran's scarred face twitched. One of his hands moved to touch a particularly deep scar that ran across his throat. "My unit," he said bitterly. "The 73rd Valerian Shock Battalion? We were the best warriors in the Coalition fleet. Elite soldiers, we had crushed rebellions on 47 worlds. But Earth was different," Jake pressed gently. HFY finally lifted his glass and took a long drink. The liquid burned down his throat, but he welcomed the pain. It was nothing compared to the memories. "Different," he said, with a harsh laugh that made nearby patrons turn their heads. "Your species does not understand the meaning of that word. When the Coalition first detected your world, the briefings were simple. Primitive species, basic kinetic weapons, chemical rockets. We expected another easy integration." Jake's recording device captured every word as HFY continued. "The intelligence report said humans were young. Violent, yes, but in the way that all primitive species are violent, like children with sticks fighting over toys. The war planners gave us 3 days to secure your major population centers." 3 days for an entire world. The alien commander stared at his reflection in the amber liquid. In it, he could see the young soldier he had been 20 years ago, confident, proud, unbroken. "We approached your moon first. Luna Base, you called it. A small outpost with perhaps 40 of your people, mining equipment, basic defensive systems. My battalion had 300 of the finest warriors in the galaxy. We carried plasma weapons that could melt through starship hulls, personal shields that could stop your primitive bullets. We were gods of war, and we were coming to discipline children." Jake scribbled notes even though his device was recording. "What happened when you landed?" HFY's 4 eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, they held a pain that made the human reporter lean back. "We sent the standard surrender demand. Every species receives the same message. Submit to Coalition authority, lay down your weapons. Accept integration into galactic civilization. Resist and face consequences." And the humans responded? A woman answered our transmission. Lieutenant Lisa Hayes, young, maybe 25. "Of your years." She looked directly into our communication device with these strange, small eyes your species has. Just 2 eyes, so tiny, but when she looked at us, HFY paused and took another drink. "What did she say?" "She said, 'Go to hell?'" The alien warrior's voice grew quiet. "Just those 3 words. Then she cut the transmission." Jake blinked. That was it. That was it. No negotiation. No fear, no begging for mercy, just defiance. HFY shook his head slowly. We had heard defiance before, of course. Every species tries to resist at first. But there is always fear. Underneath, always the knowledge that they are outmatched. This human female showed nothing but anger. The cantina around them had grown completely silent. Other patrons, many of them veterans from various worlds, listened without pretending otherwise. This was history being told. The assault began at dawn your time, Zexai continued. Standard deployment. Atmospheric fighters to suppress defensive positions, drop ships to land troops. We had done this dance on dozens of worlds. It always ended the same way. But not this time, not this time, the alien agreed. The humans did something we had never seen before. They did not retreat when our fighters appeared. They did not surrender when our troops landed. They did not break when we demonstrated our superior weapons. Zexai's scarred hands clenched into fists on the table. They fought, not like cornered animals fighting for survival. Not like desperate creatures making their last stand. They fought. Like ... he struggled for words. Like they had been waiting for us, like they wanted us to come. Jake's pen stopped moving. What do you mean? I mean that Lieutenant Hayes and her 40 soldiers acted as if 300 alien warriors with advanced weapons were exactly what they had been hoping to face that day. They took positions, they coordinated their defense, they smiled. Smiled? Smiled, Zexai confirmed. As if this was not a hopeless battle against impossible odds, but the most natural thing in the universe. As if dying for their small outpost was not a tragedy, but an honor. The recording device continued to capture every word as commander. Zexai prepared to tell the human reporter about the day his understanding of warfare changed forever. The cantina was packed now, with aliens standing 3 deep around Zixthara's table. Word had spread throughout Kepler 7 station that a veteran was finally telling the real story of the human wars. Even the station's security chief had arrived. Though he made no move to disperse the crowd, Zixthara looked around at all the faces staring at him and seemed to realize for the first time how many beings were listening to his words. His mechanical hand trembled slightly as he reached for what would be his final drink of the evening. You want to know how the war ended, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent cantina. You want to know why the mighty coalition, with all our ships and weapons and advanced technology, agreed to a peace treaty that gave humans everything they wanted. Keelathan nodded, her recording device now connected to an external power source to keep it running. The official reports say the coalition achieved all strategic objectives and granted humans limited autonomy as a gesture of goodwill. The veterans' laugh was harsh and bitter. Goodwill. Yes, that's what they would call it. The truth is simpler and more terrifying. We stopped fighting humans because we realized we couldn't win. Not because we lacked firepower or numbers, but because we finally understood what we were really fighting against. He took a long drink before continuing. After the Steel Nebula disaster, Coalition High Command pulled back all remaining fleets. No more direct confrontations, no more massive battles. Instead, they decided to strangle human space slowly. Cut off their supply lines, blockade their colonies, force them to surrender through economic pressure. A Manthari trader near the back called out, "That should have worked. Humans need resources like everyone else." "That's what we thought too," Zixthara replied. "The blockade lasted 18 months. We cut off every major trade route, stopped all shipments of food, medicine, raw materials. By our calculations, human colonies should have been begging for surrender within 6 months." The veteran's compound eyes reflected the dim cantina lights as he remembered. Instead, human resistance grew stronger. Every month we maintained the blockade, more human ships appeared to challenge it. Not warships built in proper shipyards, but converted freighters, mining vessels, even passenger liners armed with improvised weapons. Where were they getting the resources to build ships if you had them blockaded? Keelathan asked. That's what we couldn't understand at first. Intelligence reports showed human colonies were running short on everything. Food rationing, power restrictions, medical shortages. Yet somehow they kept producing more ships, more weapons, more soldiers willing to die fighting us. Zixthara finished his drink and pushed the empty glass away. It took us almost a year to figure out the truth. Humans weren't just fighting to defend their own colonies. They were fighting for each other. A mining colony would go without food to send metal to a shipyard. A farming world would give up medical supplies to help a military base. They had turned their entire civilization into one giant support network. The crowd in the cantina shifted. Restlessly, the concept seemed to make many of the aliens uncomfortable. But that wasn't the worst discovery, the veteran continued. The worst discovery was that human resistance tactics were spreading to other species. The Altarians started using hit-and-run attacks against Coalition patrols. The Centauri began hiding their fleets in nebulae and asteroid fields. Even the peaceful Draxians started refusing to pay Coalition taxes. A Krillian merchant pushed forward through the crowd. Surely the Coalition could have crushed these small rebellions easily. 1 rebellion, yes. 5 rebellions, probably. But humans had done something no one expected. They had proven that the Coalition could be beaten. And once that idea spread, it became impossible to contain. Zixthura's scarred face grew grim. Within 2 years of the human war starting, the Coalition was facing uprising on 40 different worlds. Not organized campaigns, but thousands of small acts of defiance inspired by human examples. Species that had accepted Coalition rule for centuries suddenly decided they wanted to be free. The veteran looked around the packed cantina, meeting the eyes of beings from a dozen different worlds. That's when the Coalition leadership finally understood the real threat. Humans weren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to teach it to fight back. The final battle wasn't a battle at all, Zixthara said quietly. It was a choice. Continue fighting humans and face rebellions on every Coalition world, or negotiate a peace that would stop the spread of human ideas about freedom and independence. Keelathan realized she was holding her breath. What was the deciding factor? Captain Ryan Burke and the UES Defiance? The veteran's voice carried a mixture of respect and fear. Burke was the last human commander we faced in direct combat. His ship was cornered by a full Coalition battle group near the Vega system. 30 Coalition ships against 1 human frigate that was already damaged and running low on supplies. The cantina was so quiet that the soft hum of life support systems seemed loud. Even the bartender had stopped moving to listen. Burke could have surrendered. Should have surrendered. His ship was outgunned, outnumbered, and had no chance of escape. Instead, he sent a message to our fleet commander that still gives me nightmares. Zixthara closed his eyes as if trying to block out the memory. Burke said that humans had learned something important during the war. They had learned that freedom was more valuable than life, and that some ideas were worth dying for. Then he thanked us for teaching them this lesson and said he hoped other species would learn it too. What did he do? Whispered someone in the crowd. Burke had converted his ship's entire cargo hold into a massive transmitter. While our ships moved in for the kill, he broadcast the complete tactical records of every human victory in the war. Battle plans, ship modifications, psychological warfare techniques, everything. He sent it all across the galaxy on every frequency, to every species in every language. The veteran opened his eyes and looked directly at Keelathan. Then Burke did what humans always did when facing impossible odds. He attacked. Not to win, but to make sure his message had time to reach as many worlds as possible. His ship was destroyed in minutes, but his transmission continued for 6 hours. Within days, the data Burke died to transmit was being studied on worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans were learning human tactics, human strategies, human ideas about fighting for freedom. The Coalition's worst nightmare had come true. The humans had weaponized hope itself. Zixthara stood up slowly, his mechanical limbs whirring as he balanced himself. That's when the Coalition agreed to negotiate. Not because we couldn't destroy the remaining human ships, but because we realized that killing humans wouldn't kill human ideas. And those ideas were more dangerous than any weapon. The veteran looked around the packed cantina one final time. The war officially ended 3 years ago, but we never really won. Every battle we claimed as victory cost us more than we could afford, while every human defeat only made them more dangerous. They taught the galaxy that advanced technology means nothing against unconventional thinking and absolute determination. As Zixthara limped toward the cantina's exit, his final words echoed through the silent room. If you ever encounter humans, remember this. They don't fight for conquest or glory or resources. They fight for each other and for the idea that everyone deserves to be free. And there is no weapon in the galaxy that can defeat that kind of madness. The crowd parted silently as the scarred veteran made his way to the door. Behind him, Keelathan sat staring at her recording device, realizing she held the most important story of her career. Around her, aliens from dozens of worlds exchanged glances and whispered conversations, all thinking the same dangerous thought that humans had planted in their minds. Maybe freedom was worth fighting for, after all. The cantina had filled with curious aliens as word spread through the space station that someone was finally telling the truth about the human wars. Zixthara seemed uncomfortable with the growing audience, but the alcohol had loosened his tongue, and the memories demanded to be spoken. 3 months after Proxima Ridge, the Coalition High Command decided to end the human problem once and for all. The veteran said, his mechanical arm clicking as he gestured. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 2,000 ships from 12 different species, all under the command of Admiral Korfthek himself. Keelathan had to lean closer to hear over the crowd that had gathered. The Battle of the Steel Nebula? The Steel Nebula was supposed to be humanity's grave. Zixthara's scarred face showed no emotion, but his good eye twitched with remembered pain. Intelligence reports said the humans had gathered their entire remaining fleet there. Maybe 40 ships total, hiding in the electromagnetic storms where our sensors couldn't track them properly. A Thraxian merchant pushed closer to the table. 40 ships against 2,000? Even humans couldn't win those odds. Zixthara turned to look at the merchant with something that might have been pity. That's what we thought. Admiral Korfthek called it a turkey shoot. He planned to sweep through the nebula in formation, flush out the human ships, and destroy them all in one decisive battle. The veteran paused to order another drink, his 7th or 8th of the evening. The bartender, a massive Gorlek with 4 arms, seemed reluctant to serve him more alcohol but didn't dare refuse a war veteran. The human fleet was commanded by Admiral Rachel Stone, Zixthara continued. Another civilian pressed into military service when the war started. She had been a cargo hauler before, running supplies between the outer colonies. No formal naval training, no experience with fleet tactics. Just another human who refused to quit when any sane person would have. Run. Keelathan checked her recording device again. The memory storage was almost full, but she couldn't risk missing any of this story. What made Stone different from the other human commanders you faced? Stone understood something that all our military academies had missed, the veteran replied. She understood that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make your enemy think they're winning until it's too late to stop you. The crowd pressed closer as Zixthara's voice grew stronger. Even drunk, the old soldier knew how to hold an audience. When our fleet entered the Steel Nebula, Stone's ships were waiting for us. But instead of attacking, they ran. Every time our sensors picked up a human vessel, it would fire a few shots and then disappear deeper into the electromagnetic storms. Our commanders were thrilled. Finally, the humans were showing some sense and retreating. The veteran's laugh was bitter and sharp. Admiral Korfthek ordered the fleet to pursue. He wanted to catch the humans before they could escape the nebula entirely. So our ships spread out across 100 cubic kilometers, chasing phantom contacts and sensor ghosts. But it was a trap, said a Zephyrian pilot who had squeezed through the crowd to listen. The biggest trap ever set in galactic history. Zixthara's mechanical fingers drummed against the table with increasing speed. Stone had spent weeks mapping every magnetic field, every storm current, every piece of debris in that nebula. Her ships could navigate through electromagnetic interference that blinded our sensors and disabled our communications. The veteran took another drink before continuing. While our fleet was spread out chasing decoys, Stone moved her real forces into position. She had divided her 40 ships into 17 different attack groups, each one hiding in a separate storm pocket. When she gave the signal, they all attacked at once. 17 simultaneous attacks? Keelathan repeated, making notes. How is that possible with only 40 ships? Human mathematics, Zixthara said with a mixture of admiration and horror. Stone had calculated exactly how many ships she needed at each attack point to cause maximum damage. Some groups had only 2 vessels, others had 6 or 7. But each group knew exactly where to hit us and when. The cantina was completely silent now except for the veteran's voice and the soft hum of life support systems. Even the bartender had stopped serving other customers to listen. The attacks came from every direction at once. Above, below, from inside asteroid clusters we thought were empty. Human ships appeared out of electromagnetic storms that should have torn them apart, fired everything they had, and vanished again before we could respond. Zixthara's scarred face twisted with remembered pain. But the real genius was in Stone's timing. She had studied our fleet formations, our command protocols, our response patterns. Every attack was designed to force us to react in a specific way, and every reaction led us deeper into her trap. What kind of trap? Asked the Vortanian trader. Stone had turned the entire nebula into a weapon. The veteran's voice dropped to almost a whisper. While we were chasing her decoy ships, her engineers had been placing charges throughout the nebula's metallic debris fields. Not to destroy our ships directly, but to create cascading electromagnetic pulses that would disable our electronics. The crowd pressed even closer as Zixthara continued his story. When Admiral Korfek finally realized what was happening in order to retreat, Stone triggered her trap. Every piece of charged debris in the nebula discharged at once. The resulting electromagnetic storm was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Half our fleet lost power immediately. Ships drifted helpless while their crews tried to restart dead engines. The other half couldn't communicate or coordinate because the electromagnetic interference blocked all signals. Zixthara finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. That's when Stone's ships came out of hiding for the final attack. They had been modified to operate in high electromagnetic environments. Hardened electronics, manual backup controls, even magnetic compass navigation. Primitive technology that worked when our advanced systems failed. The battle turned into a slaughter. Our ships were sitting targets while human vessels moved freely through the storm, picking off disabled vessels one by one. In 6 hours we lost over 800 ships. Stone's fleet lost maybe a dozen. The veteran's mechanical arm clicked as he reached for another drink that wasn't there. But the worst part wasn't the tactical defeat. It was the realization that Stone had been planning this trap from the moment we entered the nebula. Every retreat, every skirmish, every apparent mistake had been calculated to put us exactly where she wanted us. How many coalition forces escaped? Keelathan asked quietly. About 400 ships made it out of the nebula, Zixthara replied, but they weren't the same crews that went in. They had seen their entire understanding of warfare destroyed by a cargo hauler with 40 beat-up ships and a plan that turned physics itself into a weapon. The veteran looked around the crowded cantina with eyes that had seen too much. After the Steel Nebula, word spread through the coalition fleet that humans couldn't be beaten by conventional tactics. Because they didn't fight conventional wars. They fought with their brains, their courage, and their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Zixthara's mechanical hand shook slightly as he reached for his 5th drink of the evening. The other aliens in the cantina had stopped pretending to mind their own business and were openly listening now. Some had pulled up chairs, forming a small audience around the scarred veteran's table. The fighting on Proxima Ridge lasted 7 weeks, he continued, his voice growing hoarse. 7 weeks of the most brutal combat any of us had ever seen. But it wasn't the length of the battle that broke us. It was what the humans were willing to do to win. Keelathan noticed that her recording device was getting warm from continuous use. You mentioned sacrifice in your earlier reports. What exactly did you mean? The veteran's compound eyes dimmed as he remembered. Humans have a concept that doesn't translate well into any other language. They call it taking one for the team. It means dying so others can live. Most species understand individual sacrifice for family or offspring, but humans take it further. He paused to drink, and the purple liquid seemed to glow brighter in the dim cantina light. On the 15th day of the ground assault, we finally broke through Parker's outer defenses. Our forces reached the main habitat complex where the human civilians were supposed to be hiding. We expected to find thousands of frightened people ready to surrender. But you found something else, Kilithan said, already knowing the pattern of these stories. We found Commander Lisa Hayes and 50 human volunteers. Zixthara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Hayes was a cargo ship captain who had been visiting the colony when the war started. No military rank, no combat training. Just a woman who refused to run when her people needed her. The veteran stared at his reflection in the glass. Hayes and her volunteers had stayed behind when everyone else evacuated to the deep tunnels. They knew we would eventually break through the outer defenses. They knew they couldn't stop an entire army. But they stayed anyway. Why would they do such a thing? Asked a Krillian trader who had been listening from a nearby table. Zixthara turned to look at the trader with eyes that had seen too much. Because someone had to buy time for the evacuation ships to escape. Hayes and her people turned the habitat complex into one final trap. Not to kill us, though they managed that, too, but to delay us long enough for 30,000 civilians to reach the transport ships hidden in the outer asteroid belt. The cantina fell completely silent except for the soft hum of air recyclers. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses. To listen, Hayes rigged the complex's fusion reactor to overload, the veteran continued. Not a quick explosion that would kill everyone instantly. A slow cascade failure that would take exactly 47 minutes to reach critical mass. Just enough time for the transports to reach minimum safe distance. Kilithan felt her skin crawl despite the warm air. She told you this? She broadcast it on all frequencies so everyone could hear. Coalition forces, human civilians, everyone in the system. 47 minutes to evacuate or die with her. Zixthara's mechanical fingers drummed against the table again. Our commanders ordered an immediate retreat. No tactical objective was worth losing an entire army to a madwoman with a bomb. The veteran took another drink before continuing. But Hayes wasn't finished. She offered us a deal. Her life for safe passage for the civilian transports? If we let the evacuation ships leave the system unharmed, she would shut down the reactor overload. If we attacked them, she would detonate immediately and take half our fleet with her. Surely. Your commanders wouldn't negotiate with terrorists, said another alien listener. That's what Captain Vextar said. He called Hayes a terrorist and ordered an attack on the evacuation ships. Zixthara's scarred face twisted with pain. Hayes kept her word. The reactor detonated the moment our fighters opened fire on the first transport. The explosion vaporized the entire habitat complex, along with 3 of our assault ships and Hayes herself. The silence in the cantina was complete now. Even the background hum of the station seemed muted. But that wasn't the worst part. The veteran whispered. The worst part was the message Hayes left behind, a recording that played on repeat after the explosion. Her final words to her own people. Zixthara closed his eyes as if trying to block out the memory. She didn't curse us or threaten revenge. She didn't cry or beg for forgiveness. She just said she was proud of them and that they should keep fighting for each other. Then she laughed. Just like Morrison had done. Like dying for strangers was the most natural thing in the universe. The journalist realized she was holding her breath. What happened to the evacuation ships? They escaped, all of them. 30,000 civilians. Made it to the outer colonies because one human woman was willing to die for people she had never met. The veteran's voice cracked slightly. And every one of those refugees joined the human resistance. Hayes' sacrifice didn't end the war, it spread it. Zixthara ordered another drink with a shaking hand. Word of what happened at Proxima Ridge spread through human space like wildfire. Every colony, every ship, every human who heard the story learned the same lesson. That sometimes the only way to save everyone is for someone to stay behind. The coalition tried to suppress the recordings, he continued, but humans are stubborn about their heroes. They turned Hayes into a legend. Ships named after her, colonies, even children. And wherever her name was spoken, more humans decided they would rather die fighting than live under coalition rule. The veteran finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. We won the Battle of Proxima Ridge, took the colony, controlled the mining rights, achieved every tactical objective. But we lost something more important. We lost the war of ideas. Because humans had shown the galaxy that there are things worth dying for, and people worth dying with. Keelathan realized that her hands were shaking as she took notes. How many more battles were there? Too many, Zixtara replied. And in every one, more humans learned to fight like Hayes and Morrison. Not for glory or conquest, but for each other. And that, young journalist, is the most dangerous enemy any army can face. Duty 6 months later. She teaches military ethics at the Human War College now. Ethics, Rep Commander Zethkri, did not appear in the officers' lounge on the fourth evening. The 5 cadets waited for over an hour before the mechanical server informed them that the commander had been found unconscious in his quarters and was currently receiving medical treatment in the station's health center. They were told to return the following night if they wished to continue their education. When they arrived on the 5th evening, they found Zethkri looking worse than ever. His blue scales had taken on an ashen color, and his yellow eyes were rimmed with red. He sat hunched over a single glass of water, his clawed hands shaking as he lifted it to his lips. The mechanical server hovered nearby, but no alcohol was visible on the table. "The doctors say I cannot drink any more," Zethkri said, without looking up as the cadets took their seats. "They say my liver is failing, that the alcohol is killing me slowly. They do not understand that the alcohol is the only thing that lets me sleep without dreaming about what I learned during the war." The female Zephyrian leaned forward with concern. "Commander, we do not need to continue these sessions. Perhaps you should focus on your health." Zethkri's laugh was bitter and harsh. "My health was destroyed the day I began to think like a human. But you need to hear the rest of the story. Someone needs to understand what we really allied ourselves with, and what that alliance will cost us in the years to come." He took a sip of water, his hands still trembling. "After the war ended, I was promoted to senior advisor and given a comfortable position at Alliance headquarters. Medals, commendations, a pension that would support me for the rest of my life, everything a career officer could want." The commander's voice grew quieter, forcing the cadets to lean closer. "But I could not sleep. Every night I would lie in my bed and see Amanda Price watching her daughter's video message before ordering the bombardment of civilian targets. I would hear Kevin Hayes explaining how pain was just information while infection ate away at his leg. I would remember Lisa Barnes turning a simple rescue mission into psychological warfare that broke trained soldiers' minds." Zethkri set his glass down carefully, his yellow eyes focusing on each cadet in turn. 3 months after I returned to Alliance Space, I received a message from Captain Jake Morrison. He was retiring from active duty and wanted to meet with me one final time. He said there were things about humanity that I needed to understand before I wrote my final report about human military effectiveness. The male Canthery's ears perked forward. "What did Morrison want to tell you?" "The truth," Zethkri replied. "The truth that no human official would ever admit publicly, but that Morrison felt I deserved to know after serving alongside his people for so long." He paused to take another sip of water, his movements careful and deliberate. "Morrison arranged to meet me on Luna, Earth's moon, at a memorial site dedicated to human soldiers who had died in conflicts before they ever left their home planet. We walked among thousands of stone markers, each one representing a human who had died in wars I had never heard of." The commander's voice took on a hollow quality that made the young aliens shift uncomfortably. "Morrison told me about Earth's history while we walked among those graves. He explained how humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Wars over territory, resources, religion, ideology, skin color, languages. Things so trivial that other species would never consider them worth fighting over. Zethkri's yellow eyes grew distant. Morrison showed me markers for humans who had died at places with names like Gettysburg, Verdun, Normandy, Vietnam, Afghanistan. He explained how each war had taught his species new lessons about violence, new methods of breaking their enemy's will to fight. The Nexari cadet tilted his head in confusion. But why did he want you to know about ancient Earth conflicts? Because, Zethkri said, Morrison wanted me to understand that everything I had witnessed during our war was not exceptional human behavior. It was not humans rising to meet an extraordinary challenge. It was simply humans being exactly what evolution had made them. He struggled to focus on the cadets' faces. Morrison said something that night that I will never forget. He said, "Commander, every human child learns about war before they learn about peace. We study our failures at places like Little Bighorn and our victories at places like Midway with equal intensity. We are the children of a species that survived by being better at killing than anything else that ever lived on our planet." The lounge around them had grown quiet, but Zethkri seemed unaware of his surroundings. Morrison explained that human parents tell their children bedtime stories about brave soldiers and noble warriors. Human schools teach military history as a regular subject. Human entertainment is filled with stories about conflicts, battles, heroes who win through violence. The commander took another sip of water, his hand steadier now as he focused on his memories. I asked Morrison why humans surrounded their children with stories of war and death. He looked at me with those calm eyes of his and said, "Because we want them to be ready. Because we know that someday someone will try to take away everything they love, and when that day comes, we want them to be prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect it." Zethkri leaned back in his chair, his yellow eyes closing for a moment. That was when Morrison told me the real secret of human military success. He said, "Commander, other species fight wars to achieve specific goals. Humans fight wars to ensure that our enemies never want to fight us again. We do not seek victory. We seek the complete elimination of the threat." The female Zephyrian's crystalline skin had dulled to almost gray. "What does that mean?" "It means," Zethkri explained, "that when humans go to war, they do not fight until they win. They fight until their enemies are psychologically incapable of ever threatening them again. Every tactic I witnessed, every strategy that seemed excessive or brutal, was designed not just to defeat the hegemony, but to make sure they would never recover enough to pose a future threat." He opened his eyes and looked directly at the young cadets. Morrison told me that night that humans are just as terrified of themselves as other species are terrified of them. He said, "Commander, we know what we are capable of. We know that. Given sufficient motivation, there is no line we will not cross, no action we will not take, no sacrifice we will not make to protect what we love." The commander's voice grew even quieter. Morrison explained that every human leader, every general, every politician who makes decisions about war carries the weight of knowing that they belong to a species capable of total destruction. They know that if they ever truly unleash human military doctrine without restraint, they could eliminate all life in the galaxy. Zethkri reached for his water glass with both hands, his trembling having returned. I asked Morrison how humans live with that knowledge, how they function knowing what they are capable of. He said, "Commander, we live with it by making sure we never have to find out how far we are really willing to go." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, Jorek spoke. "Commander, what happened after that conversation?" Morrison retired to a small farm on Earth, Zethkri replied. "He grows food now, raises animals, tends to growing things instead of destroying them. He sends me messages sometimes, pictures of his crops, stories about his grandchildren learning to walk and talk and laugh." The commander finished his water and set the glass down carefully. "But I know the truth about Morrison and every other human veteran of that war. They carry the weight of what they did, what they were willing to do, what they might have to do again if circumstances require it." Zethkri looked around the table at the young faces watching him. "I now serve as a military advisor, helping other species understand human tactical doctrine. But my real purpose is different. My real job is to make sure that humanity's allies never give them reason to become their enemies. He leaned forward, his yellow eyes intense despite his obvious exhaustion. Because I have seen what humans do to species they consider threats. I have watched them systematically destroy not just armies and governments, but entire ways of life. I have witnessed their ability to remain moral beings while committing acts that would drive other species insane. The commander struggled to stand, his movements unsteady but determined. The humans saved the galaxy by being exactly what they have always been, the most efficient killers evolution ever produced. But they are also the most dangerous allies we could possibly have, because they define friendship and enmity in terms that other species cannot fully comprehend. Zethkri began walking toward the exit, his steps careful and measured. Sleep well, cadets. Dream peacefully about a galaxy where war is a distant memory and peace seems permanent. But remember what I have told you about the species that guards our borders and keeps our enemies at bay. He paused at the doorway and looked back at the 5 young aliens who had listened to his stories. The humans are watching the darkness beyond our borders, standing ready to do whatever is necessary to protect the light of civilization. Pray that they never decide we no longer deserve their protection. With that, Commander Zethkri walked out of the officers' lounge, leaving behind 5 cadets who finally understood.